the July edition of the Enterprise UX meetup. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope that you've had a snack. I wore my Snack Leap t-shirt, especially for the occasion. I don't think I got any snacks. Anyway, that's alright, I'll worry about that later. We're going to hear from Krystal first tonight. Isn't that exciting? I'm excited. We saw Krystal at UX London and found her talk on onboarding, or onboarding for the long run in particular, to be fantastic, so we're really excited to have her here this evening. Krystal's a senior UX designer who loves tackling complex design challenges, don't we all? Easy ones are boring, complicated's great. She's extremely passionate, an area that she's extremely passionate about is the onboarding of new and existing users. She shares tips for designing in-product education on her design blog and maintains a collection of onboarding reviews from websites, apps and other products. In addition to teaching and guiding users, have you got time to do other stuff? No? Yes? You do? Okay. So you design all sorts of experiences for web, mobile and wearable products. You've worked for companies like NVIDIA, eBay and most importantly, the Goog. Folks, Krystal, welcome. Thank you.
Alright, I'm going to try to speak as loudly as I can. I may not have as loud of a voice, but we'll see how this goes. Alright, so thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm very excited because this is a topic that I am super passionate about. User onboarding, right? It's that process of acclimating a new person into a product or service, and it takes place over time. And we will typically start exploring onboarding because it comes with that promise of carrying our new users upwards on the path to retention and engagement. And at some point, we'll probably declare, hey, let's design onboarding, and we'll start conjuring up images of welcome screens. And we'll ask ourselves, how should we begin with a new user? But I'd like to start this evening by having you think about the end. I want you to each be thinking about this question. Where does onboarding end in my product today? As you think about that, let me share with you where I used to think onboarding ended in my first real tech job. How many of you have seen a screen like this before? Yeah, all right. It's the kind of thing that pops up after you set up a device or a piece of software, and it's the thing that I used to think marked the end of onboarding because in my first tech job, I was responsible for creating setup wizards for printers and copiers that were sold to businesses. I know, real exciting stuff. It's amazing what you can do with these printer instructions. But I was told that this was the most important part of the customer journey, the setup flow. So I would spend weeks perfecting instructions for steps like how to connect cables into the back of your printer. And I would design a beautiful "you're all set" screen, wishing people on their merry paths forward with their new device. But of course, as I got into the world of app or web design, I realized that this approach did not scale because digital products are constantly evolving, usage scenarios are always changing, and it's really easy for someone to abandon these at any time. So we can't just restrict their onboarding to something as limited as setup. Yet that is still how many of us approach designing onboarding. See, we focus so much on solving the beginning that that's all we build, and we end our onboarding experiences too soon, typically with the first run experience. And it's tempting to do that, right? First run is a defined moment in time, something you can guarantee all of your new users will see at least some part of. So if you do it really well, maybe you can call it out as a beautiful standalone piece of work in your portfolios, or even listed as a feature in your release notes. And don't get me wrong, these first impressions, they are important, but not if they're designed at the expense of long-term support. Because then we're just putting all of our resources into designing something akin to a new hire's orientation meeting at a new company, right? It's a single event presented in a one-size-fits-all manner, and therefore it can only achieve short-term logistics, like getting people to sign paperwork. True onboarding, though, that's about so much more. It will help guide people through multiple events in their journeys through our products. It will use diverse methods to onboard people who are in different situations, all so that it can blend into a long-term approach to guidance in our products. After all, retention and engagement, those are long-term goals. So we need to get users beyond those short-term logistics. So I'm going to help you make a bit of a case tonight back to your teams about designing onboarding longevity. First, by digging into those multiple events across the customer journey when onboarding can do its job. So now I'm going to ask you another question. What is onboarding's job? Just shout things out.
Make people feel comfortable.
Okay, comfortable. Nice. Well, got no other takers? It's all right. Usually one thing that comes up when people think of onboarding's job is to familiarize someone with a product or service. This can include making them feel comfortable in this space. But it also has some other things it's responsible for, like needing to learn about a new user in order to tailor an experience to their needs, or to sometimes convert them in some form or fashion, whether that means into a subscribed state, signed up, or something else that means a commitment. And it needs to guide them on their next steps to becoming engaged and retained people in our products. That's an insurmountable list of to-dos if just given the narrow window of first run in which to do them. Good employers recognize this problem when they design new hire onboarding, right? They'll think of activities in terms of months, not minutes. And so even if we don't have to think as far out as, say, 6 months, we just do need to think about extending the time onboarding has to do its jobs. So let me share with you one example of a product trying to do just that. Here's how Lumosity, a brain training website, tackles onboarding users beyond the first run. They start out with a first run experience. This first run experience includes 3 interactive starter games aimed at familiarizing someone with their technique of training mental skills. This includes familiarizing them with each skill they're training, with the mechanics of playing each game, and then recapping even more information about those skills at the end of each game played. Each of those 3 games are used so that Lumosity can learn about someone's current baseline scores, like my terrible 19% in color matching, and recommend ways that its product can help them improve on those. And they have a pretty strong call to action to sign up for a premium subscription plan, which will help them help you. But they've rightfully planned that people aren't just going to sign up for this thing right away after that first use. So they have a couple of techniques in place to try and accommodate this, such as sending an email the next day, recapping the prior day's scores, and inviting you to take another day of free training. If you complete subsequent days of training without signing up, they will continue evolving the messaging across the product to inform you again about how they can help you train mental skills and improve on your scores. And again, all of this is aimed at getting you into that converted state of things. But even after you make a commitment, they don't stop these techniques. They will continue guiding you. For example, right after you sign up, they will show you 3 additional games you can now play since you've unlocked them by making a commitment. And other parts of the product will show other areas that you can unlock and engage with repeat use. Now, another thing that Lumosity is showing throughout these various stages of the product is how frequently they reinforce the mental skills that they're training. And that's so if you understand the importance of those skills, you'll be more motivated to return to the product and take these daily training games. And Lumosity probably knows that if they were only to tell you about these things a single time, they'd be up against a pretty steep forgetting curve. This is a curve discovered in the 1880s by German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus, who found immediately after you learn something, you begin forgetting it. And after your first day of exposure, you're lucky if you remember 1/3. But luckily for us, he found a way to hack that forgetting curve by spacing out repeated exposure to that initial learning at intervals distributed over time. In the teaching world, this is referred to as spaced repetition. In the product world, it's all about thinking about how you can reinforce core concepts or core actions to maximize retention. And it's another great reason why onboarding needs more than the narrow window of first run in which to do its work. Now, these techniques that we looked at for onboarding don't just come in handy for the initial onboarding of new people, they can also come into play at other points in the journey. For example, they can create an environment that enhances the experience of maturing users by introducing them to new or existing features. Here's one example from Etsy. A little while back, they introduced a feature to sellers called Pattern. Pattern allows sellers to create a custom website design for their shops. So they had a mini onboarding flow for this, the entry point of which was in their seller dashboard. If they engaged with it, they would see any existing shop items they had are imported into the landing page area for this Pattern feature, which familiarizes them with the different things it can do and guides them through the process of selecting a theme, previewing how that looks with their products, and getting them into a state where they can start things out with a free trial. Other times, we're not just introducing people to new features, we may just be redesigning our product in such a way that core workflows may be altered. Onboarding techniques come in handy here as well. This is something the Google Drive team recognized a few years back when they had to migrate Docs users into the new Google Drive client. And so they captured a couple of their best practices in a white paper called Minimizing Change Aversion for the Google Drive launch, and they sound very similar to those we would use in new user onboarding. For example, familiarizing people with the impending change before it happens, letting people opt into it, and then guiding them between the differences between old and new versions. And taking time to also learn from them about what could be improved in the final version of the redesign so that we make it better for new and existing users alike. And sometimes you may have scenarios in which people are returning from a long lapse in use. Onboarding techniques can be helpful here as well. As an example, one product that has a long lapse in use typically is tax preparation software. People only visit it one time a year. Here's an example from TurboTax. I've returned to it from a year of non-use, and so it takes a moment to give me the option to learn a bit more about what has changed in this year's version compared to last year's version, and also tries to learn a bit what may have changed in my own life so it can update its recommendations. So onboarding techniques will allow us to guide new and existing users through multiple events in the customer journey. And being able to visualize these different opportunities when we start designing onboarding for new users will help us pick methods that will scale beyond the first run. Now, it's not just enough to allow these different events to be covered through onboarding. We also need to suit people who are in different situations with a diverse approach. And that's because the path to onboarding is not a fixed one followed the same way by every person. Right? You may toil away on a flow that goes perfectly from point A to point B, but you'll quickly find that person 1 needs a lot more support than you planned on, or that person 2 can breeze right through, or that person 3 wants to take a roundabout approach to everything. And that's okay. These paths will naturally vary because of the different backgrounds people have with your products or services, their expectations, and even the different ways in which they prefer to take in new information. And what's most important, what teaching experts like Lyndon Nilsson remind us of, is that people just learn new material best if they can be exposed to it multiple times and through multiple modalities. That's great news for us because it means we don't waste our time trying to find the one perfect flow that works for everybody. That's impossible. It just means we need to invest in building a bit of a diverse toolkit of onboarding methods to suit these different situations. Let me run through 5 categories of onboarding methods that you can consider putting into a toolkit to diversify your approach. The first category is the most critical. Everyone should have this well covered. This is the category of default experiences. Carefully consider what the initial state of your product or feature communicates to someone seeing it for the first time. For content-based experiences, it's all about the information architecture. This is a website called The Perspective. It claims to offer two sides to every story. And we can see that the way that they have organized and presented the content across the product implies this purpose without any additional onboarding experience needing to be layered upon it. For task-based experiences, it's all about embracing empty states to communicate well. This is a product called AirWander, and it tries to help you find an ideal stopover between two travel points. And so they start off by showing you the skeleton of information that you should plug in order to activate that stopover selection flow. And default settings, those can also be quite powerful. As Jared Spool found in a study he did on users of desktop computers, less than 5% of them may have ever changed their initial default settings. So what this means is, if we spend time carefully selecting good defaults, we can set people up for success. However, if we don't spend time selecting those, or if we pick the wrong ones, we can set them up for failure. So it's very important to have a strong foundation of default experiences before trying to layer on any other kinds of onboarding guidance. Now, once you do have that foundation in place, then you can look at these other methods of guidance, like inline guidance, when you weave guidance into the flow of surrounding content. Here's just one example from Nextdoor. That's a community feed website, and someone has just created their profile and joined a neighborhood. And instead of forcing the person to go through many more steps to add more information to their profile, they put the prompts for this in line with the neighborhood feed, so that a new person can immediately jump in and start reading some of the conversations happening between their neighbors without having to get interrupted with this, but they can get back to it at any time. So this category is great for supplemental steps or actions you want people to take. Now, another category of guidance is reactive guidance, when you show something in response to user action. And this one embraces a very learning by doing approach. Here's one example of reactive guidance. This one's from Google Drive. Someone has grabbed some files from their desktop and has moved them over their web client. We see this little reactive hint appear at the bottom, and it lets them know that as soon as they release those files, they'll be uploaded to the folder in view. And this is a great way of educating people who may not have been familiar with this behavior without interrupting or getting in the way of someone who already was. Now, the flip side to reactive guidance is proactive guidance. This is when you show something in advance of anticipated user need. Now, these typically take the form of stuff that's a bit more prominent just because it is proactive, but this category is not a free pass to suddenly do a bunch of pop-up overlays or other things that try to get in the way of what the user's doing right now. Good proactive guidance will still feel like a natural extension of the product it's a part of. Here's one example from a product called Duolingo. This is a language learning site and app. And here someone has just selected the new language they want to learn. And they are proactively pointed in two directions. They can make a choice between taking their first lesson or taking a placement test. Both of these paths are so that they get into the interactive lesson-taking tool as quickly as possible. This is the thing that Duolingo knows engages and retains their users. But once you are in this state, you can actually exit out of it and start exploring the default ambient state of the product on your own. But by being proactive and trying to steer you down one of these two good paths, they are again attempting to set you up for success. But no matter how much we try to anticipate when and where we should provide onboarding or guidance to people, we will inevitably miss something, and that's okay. It's just why every good onboarding toolkit is rounded out with a centralized resource for on-demand help. It means pulling together all of your support links, your customer service contact information, all of that stuff into one place, making it readily accessible. And even better is if you can point this area out to somebody during their initial onboarding, so they know where to go if they have questions. So an effective onboarding toolkit will be comprised of more than one technique. And all of these things are in place so that you have a series of backup solutions in case people don't behave according to plan, which is almost all the time. For example, and it's just a simple example, this Etsy pattern had that inline element that entered into their onboarding experience for the feature. But if someone dismissed this or otherwise ignored it, there was also an entry point in the default state of the navigation menu. And so in this way, you end up with these different pieces or attempts at guidance ready to hand off to one another, depending on the situation. And that will ultimately make onboarding and our products more accessible to a wider range of users. You start getting onboarding that behaves less like a rigid path people have to follow and more like a compass that will guide different people in different situations to the same destination. So building these diverse methods to suit these different user situations and designing onboarding that covers multiple events in the customer journey help you build onboarding that has long-term benefit for your products and your users. And that brings me back to the question I posed at the beginning today. Where does onboarding end? And this is a question I want you not just to think about on your own, but to bring back to your teams. I want you to ask it anytime you're involved in an onboarding design project. You're quickly going to see that people will have a wide variety of answers to this. And those answers may vary between products, between users, even between features. But it's okay because those are the differences that will help you illustrate to your team why you need to invest in designing onboarding. That isn't just for the first run, but as something that will carry your users for the long run. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah.
Who's got some questions? Questions?
No questions.
Go.
I have a question about rapid onboarding in an urgent scenario, like an emergency scenario where someone needs to access emergency services, for example, download an app to access emergency services. What are your reflections or maybe something from your back catalogue of work around high urgency, immediate onboarding, get me going?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when it comes to stuff like that, when it's an urgent situation, those are cases where the first run experience is the most critical one, right? Obviously, if you have I'm going to call it a shallow product situation. It's not shallow in that it helps you with emergency situations, but more the depth of your expected ongoing engagement is going to be small. In that case, you do need to focus on that first run. But it really does come down like, hopefully your default state of everything will communicate what it needs to communicate without having to have like other layers of things. So that's again, I think, where the default experience is coming.
Next question? Go.
I'm working on VR and AR projects right now, but it's quite difficult for the users to get used to that. So what do you think is important for onboarding for VR and AR?
Yeah, so those are two spaces. So in VR and AR, they have two challenges to overcome. And this is a challenge that anything that's a new platform has to overcome. First, you have to teach people about the platform itself, because it's not an ongoing it's not a historically known kind of environment, right? And then you also have to onboard them to the specific experience they are having within that. So I think it's most important that people feel comfortable with the technology, the platform, and what it can do before you spend too much time getting into the details of the product, because otherwise they won't be able to engage with it if they don't. But we're going to see like a trend where that kind of need sort of tapers off as people get more familiar with these environments. One example I've used in older versions of this deck that was kind of helpful here is Microsoft used to have right out of the box a how to use a computer mouse tutorial, right? It was just like this ASCII art looking thing, and it was pretty bare bones. But people, that was still new to them. The computer mouse was a totally new concept. But over time, obviously, if you unbox a computer today and set it up, it's not going to teach you how to use a mouse unless you can go digging through stuff. So I think that's the challenge right now, is kind of getting past that phase. where people can feel comfortable in the environment.
Do you have another question? Any question at all? No? Yeah, please.
How do you know when you've successfully onboarded someone? What are the metrics?
That's a great one. So success of onboarding is generally best tied to retention statistics. So you can do engagement, but for different products, engagement's going to be a bit of a weird one. But retention's generally a good measure. In workplaces, retention is typically the primary number they look at for employee onboarding, right? Are these people churning after 3 months or not? And then on top of that, then the next ones are like engagement, depending on what your specific product's engagement is. How you know, you tend to have to kind of want to measure things for a long-term period, like looking at, say, number of signups on the second day after launch or whatever. That'll give you some initial like, oh yeah, things are going good. But if you have all those people signing up and they drop off over time, then maybe not so great. And it's up to every product, every company to define what their comfortable area of retention is kind of in their industry. Because some may have, like the retention of an emergency app is probably not going to be valuable for them. It's more who can get through the thing and successfully connected to the help they needed, right? So in some cases, it's going to be a bit different for the product type. Well, good question. Yeah.